Well, hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Henry Overton, President and co-founder of Turnkey Solutions, and I am so glad you're here to join us today to talk about the Federal Trade Commission's safeguard rules and their mandatory requirements that they've put into place for so many companies out there, why we think they're really good ideas, and how to put them in place in your organization. Before we jump into that, I want to make sure that you know that as a valued member of the community and one of our customers or maybe a potential future customer, we have a ton of resources out there for you and your company and your team and other people that you may know up at turnkeysol.com/resources, like white papers, these kind of webinars, infographics, just a ton of stuff. We've got newsletters that we put out once a month and so much more. And if you have questions or would like to subscribe to some of those things, or if there's a resource that you may not see but be curious about getting some more information about, please ask us. Just shoot us an email at ask@turnkeysol.com or call us at 225-751-4444, and we will make sure and get you the information and resources you need. All right, so without further ado, let's jump into the subject matter today. What is this FTC Safeguard Rule? Why should we be concerned about it? In short, the FTC's standards for safeguarding customer information, or what we call the Safeguard Rule, is basically built to ensure that entities covered by that rule maintain the right protections for customer information. Now, the Safeguard Rule took effect way back a long time ago, 20 years ago, actually in 2003. It's part of something that a lot of people know as the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. It was updated in 2021 to keep it current and reflect a lot of changes in IT and technology, but it really got some teeth and entered into what they call an enforcement stage on June 9 of 2023. Which included a whole lot of steep penalties that we really need to make sure and avoid. Now, who needs to comply with the Safeguard Rule, and what kind of companies does it affect? The Safeguard Rule applies to financial institutions that are subject to the FTC's jurisdiction, but aren't subject to the enforcement authority of other regulatory agencies. And they put a lot of details into it and some examples. And by the way, we've got a ton of really good resources and additional handouts and information. We can direct you right to the FTC's guides, and we've got some handouts that will be available to us. Just ask at the end of this. But some specific examples that the FTC put out there are like retailers that extend credit, maybe not a company that takes credit cards, but if you extend credit to your clients, auto dealerships because they're doing loans for cars, even individual and very small organizations that may do real estate appraisers or very one or two person investment advisory companies, very small mortgage companies, all the way up to the big ones. Anybody that prints and sells checks, they give a ton of different examples there, but it's important that you slow down and double check this and think through, should my company recognize that we are forced to comply with this, that we have to comply with this. We really encourage you to slow down and take just a minute to look into this. There's some nuances to the law that may even implicate that a lot of law firms that give financial advice to their clientele. So there's some nuances, and we certainly recommend that you seek your legal counsel to see if you need to comply. But at a high level, those 13 categories that we've got on the screen here are pretty good examples of that the FTC put out there, that there are specific company types that need to comply. So why should you comply with it? Look, there's a lot of reasons. Not only are they pretty specific that they're going after companies. Like there was an article here in September of just this year where they specifically said that they're aiming specific communications at a lot of different kind of companies and some organizations like they were in tax preparation business, that they weren't doing this right. But look, following the law is probably a pretty good idea, period. But the law has some specific civil penalties. Like we mentioned, it's now in the enforcement stage as of June of this year, with some pretty steep fines up to like $50,000, depending on how you read it, per violation. Civil penalties like prison time, loss of business license, or suspension of business license. Any which way you look at it, the cost to comply is a whole lot cheaper than non-compliance, I would put out there. I really do believe that. So let's dig into that. That's maybe what it is and why we should comply with it and why we think it's probably a pretty good idea from just a business perspective. Let's look at like what are the specific requirements, and we can talk then about maybe why they're good technical or cybersecurity precautions. So what are the requirements? In short, the law, the Safeguard Rule, says that you have to develop, implement, and maintain an information security program that has administrative, technical, and physical safeguards designed to protect that customer information. Now, defining customer information, they go pretty specific on that. They say it's any record containing non-public personal information about a customer of a financial institution, whether in paper, electronic, or other form, that's handled or maintained by or on behalf of you or your affiliates. Now, most likely what that means for most organizations is that's all data. So it's a little vague. It kind of spreads it pretty wide there, that it's pretty much anything that's non-public, which means if it's on your files server or you're in your file cabinet or wherever, that's not public, and it has something to do with that client. So you got to look really kind of at this and say, okay, all of my data. That's the safest way, I would suggest. It specifically requires that you develop, implement, maintain, administer it. There's some very specific technical things. So there's a lot to it, and we'll go into more detail here. It specifically says that, again, the Safeguard Rule specifically says that your information security program must be written. It can't be something that you've just talked about. It must be written. It must and can be appropriate to the size and complexity of your business and the sensitivity of the information at issue. So you really have to slow down and think, yes, we have to do this, even if we're a one-person or company, or if I'm a one-person company, but I can make it, adapt it to these overall goals to my size of company. But specifically, the Safeguard Rule then says that it must contain these objectives. One, it's got to ensure the security and confidentiality of customer information. That's our primary goal. Two, it's got to protect against the anticipated threats or hazards to the security or integrity of that information. Here in Louisiana, we know all about hurricanes. Across the world, we know about hackers and the constant growth of cyber attacks against organizations of every size. So we have to think through those. But it's also got to protect against unauthorized access to that info that could result in substantial harm or inconvenience to any customer, including inconvenience there. Now, potential unauthorized access can include a hacker, but I would encourage you to think through internal access. Internal misuse of data systems or access to computer data is one of the leading issues or beginning or completions of breaches these days. Countless studies show that internal actors, not hackers, but internal actors are like employees, are some of the largest causes of breaches. We got to think through that. So specifically, the law goes even more detailed, or the guidance, the Safeguard Rule goes into some very specific guidance, and it gives us 9 steps. And we're going to go through each one of these. So I don't want to beat this too hard right here, but it goes through 9 very specific steps: designating a qualified individual, conducting a risk assessment, implementing safeguards, monitoring and testing, training your people, monitoring your service providers, keeping that information security program current, having a written incident response plan, and really involving the leadership at your company. So let's dig into each one specifically. First, the qualified individual is a person at your or company or at a service provider that is responsible for overseeing, implementing, and enforcing your information security program. It can be employed by you, or it can be employed by, commonly it's often designated as maybe a lead person at a IT company or a managed service provider, somebody like Turnkey Solutions, but it can be somebody internal or outside, and they have to be in charge of it, and they got to be named and designated. Second, control that they specifically say we got to do is we've got to do a risk assessment. Now, it deals a little bit on the details of the risk assessment, and this is really good guidance. If you want to know how to do a risk assessment really well, this is good advice. Start with your inventory. You can't make a good information security program until you know what your information is, what your data types are, where you're saving them. Are you putting things in Dropbox or on this website, or is it on the workstations, or is it only on the servers? It's a very complicated question most of the time when we dig into it with a company of any kind of sophistication. After that inventory, assess for foreseeable risks and threats, both internal and external, to the security, confidentiality, and integrity of that customer information. Your risk assessment must result in a written document, and that document must also discuss the criteria that was used for evaluating those risks. While you're doing the risk assessment, and we certainly talk about this with customers while we're working through this process, you got to think through how could the information be disclosed without authorization? How could it be misused? How could it be altered or destroyed? And you got to really think through a whole lot of what ifs when you're doing a good, healthy risk assessment. And then from there, the Safeguard Rule specifically says that you need to reassess it in light of changes or new threats. Candidly, there's new threats like minute by minute in the IT world, but depending on the size of your organization and where your assets are and your complexity of your business, we really feel here at Turnkey Solutions that annually is a bare minimum for even the smallest, most simple of organizations, because threats change and technology changes, and annually is probably as far as any company should stretch that process out. Third, specific safeguards are recommended or required, but it's step 3 or control 3 for the Safeguard Rules is based on the risk assessment, put into place safeguards to control those risks. Now, they specify multiple steps like implement periodic review of your access controls. So whatever we're going to put into place, let's start with the awareness that we're going to go check it on a regular basis. Know what you have and where you have it. Again, that's back to that inventory. Keep a really good inventory of your data, your systems, your users, those all of those important assets. Encrypt customer information, assess the necessity and health and supportability of your applications that you use, implement MFA for anyone accessing customer information, dispose of that information securely, and they even detail specific timeframes about which you should make sure that your information is disposed, anticipate and evaluate changes, and maintain a log of activity. Now, the 3 that I highlighted here are really important. There's really no playing around with these, and a lot of companies we see aren't doing these. First is that encrypting customer information on your systems when at rest or in motion. You got to stop and think, where is my data being saved? A lot of times we see reports being saved on a C drive, and we're not encrypting those hard drives. That's a violation, and it's a big security risk. If it's in motion, we got to really think through, how are my staff, my employees emailing files? How are we uploading files to websites or to other portals? So all those things where you're saving it or you're sending it from point A to point B, we're required to encrypt it. Implement MFA for anyone accessing information, customer information. There's not any ambiguity in this control that this safeguard that they're recommending or requiring. So MFA, multi-factor authentication, is a requirement for all of your systems, not just maybe your workstations or your email, but all of your systems that might contain customer information. And maintain a log. Review it regularly, periodically, regularly. Even on small companies, it's harder to do that review if you wait for too long. But there's some automated systems that can do that on more of a real-time basis and get you reports that you can look at. But in a smaller organization, monthly might be good. So you should look at how those MFA systems and really facilitate a usage and login logs. Those really help, and most of your software packages nowadays can be set to maintain that log. Fourth control in the Safeguard rule is to monitor and test the effectiveness of those safeguards. Make sure that they're working. Test your procedures for detecting actual and attempted attacks. For information systems, you can do that with a continuous monitoring program. It's not just testing your firewalls, but it's monitoring your antivirus and your firewalls and all those things to make sure that the hackers aren't coming at you. Now, if you're really small and you don't feel you need to implement continuous monitoring, the rule actually says that you can just do an annual pen test at a smaller side, including a system-wide scan, maybe every 6 months, to test for publicly known security vulnerabilities. There's a lot of very expensive pen testing that you can do, but even the simplest vulnerability and security risk audits can compare how healthy your computers are and what publicly known security vulnerabilities exist on your computers, if they have this patch or don't have it, and those sort of things. So this doesn't have to be terribly expensive. In addition, test and check your effectiveness of all those precautions and all those safeguards whenever there's a big change. You make a big change to your network, you make a big change in terms of what systems you put in place, or a small change, any kind of material change, I think is the term they use, check again. And whenever there's big circumstances, you have a security event, you merge with another company, if there's changes or events or you suspect something might have come up, test your security safeguards. Fifth step is really an important one that the world, we've got to do better at this, is security training for your staff. And we always tell people, look, your firewall, your antivirus, all those things are worthless in preventing a cyber hack or massive, expensive breach. And hear me again, the firewalls and antivirus and all those things are worthless at preventing a big breach if your staff aren't trained, because there are too many ways for users to circumvent all the security precautions that we can put into place if they intend to or just don't know what they're doing and aren't very savvy to risks and don't know how to see a threat when it's coming at them. Employees trained to spot risks can multiply the effectiveness of those firewalls, antivirus, backup systems. All your security program can be really way more effective if your staff is very savvy. Provide them with scheduled training and scheduled refreshers. Insist on specialized training for those key members of your team that have to implement portions of your information security program, and verify that your team is really keeping their ear to the ground. You can do this really well with some of the automated or scheduled training programs that are available now, where they get a little bit of training, maybe a minute worth of training. Some people call it micro training. You get a little bit of that every day or two, and it's or every a couple times a week. It's really effective at keeping people kind of on their toes and thinking through things. Step 6 of the Safeguards rule is to monitor your service providers. All those gears in your businesses' ecosystem that keep things running, like your credit card providers, your IT company, your accountant, your landscaper, all the different organizations that interact with you to keep your business going, those have an important spot and role to play in your overall security. So make sure that your contracts spell out your security expectations for them, and build into your contracts with them that they're going to maintain their security at a certain level in a way to protect you, and build in a way that you're going to be able to check on how well they're doing. And make sure that you periodically reassess that. Don't go 10, 15 years without double checking on your very favorite vendors' security controls, because things change for you and things change for them as well. Maintaining a good visibility into how your your service providers are protecting themselves is an important step in protecting you and your customer information. Number 7, keep your security program current. If your security program looks like this dusty old book on a shelf and it's got cobwebs on it, it's worthless. Trust me. The best programs are flexible enough to change with the changes in your staff. Don't have one person's name hard-coded into the whole program. Changes to the world, emerging threats, when things change in cybersecurity, and we all have to use a different set of tools or systems to do our job, your program needs to be able to flex and needs to be updated pretty rapidly to keep up with that. 8, have a really solid incident response plan. This is the 8th and next to last step in the Safeguard Rule, so but it's an important one, and this is something we tell people all the time. I don't care what industry you're in, but this is relevant and great advice. Keep that incident response plan really current, and it needs to really think through the what ifs. Again, kind of like that disaster recovery plan. All of your plans need to have time to think through. When you're building these plans, you need to take the time to think through, what if this happened or what if that happened? So your security incident response plan should really make sure and clarify a couple things. What are the goals of the plan? What are your internal processes that your company will activate? What are you going to do internally in response? Clear roles. Who's going to do what? And who can make this decision if we're experiencing this issue and maybe the CEO is on vacation. Communication plans and who we can talk to and when in an event. A process to fix the problems that you found. Procedures for documenting and reporting those security events, and for documenting what your company is going to do next or what your company did. And the security plan, this is one of the most important parts of it, has to include steps to mandate a post-mortem of this is what we learned, this is what happened, we're going to update the security plan with these steps, and this is what it all, this is how our organization's going to be more secure and better after this event than we were before. So never let a good disaster go to waste. 9th and final step, and this is incredibly important and incredibly overlooked across so many companies that we talk with, sadly, is that the FTC Safeguard Rule requires that your qualified individual report regularly to your board of directors. They have to report at least annually to your board of directors. Now, if your organizational structure doesn't include a board of directors, it's got to be the highest person that could oversee this sort of thing inside your company. The qualified individual can't report to your CPA or to your external law firm or to your managed service provider. They have to report to the highest authority in your company on a regular basis, and that report should include an overall assessment of the company's compliance with its own information security program, and that report should include specific things like, here's how our last risk assessment did, here's the controls we have in place, here's the events that have occurred since we last met, here's the recommendations for changes to this information security program based on what we've learned since the last time we talked. And again, these requirements for the Board of Directors communications is not something that I'm telling you. It's what's in the FTC's Safeguard Rule. So that's it. That's the 9 controls specifically that the FTC Safeguard Rule specifies. And if you're thinking, okay, what do I do next? How do I go through the process of designating a qualified individual, conducting a risk assessment, implementing those safeguards, regular monitor, training, all these things, all these steps, because it's a lot if you've not done all of it before and have a robust program. But if you haven't done that or you're not sure where to start, I would always recommend start with a risk assessment. In the process, we'll talk about and find out who that qualified individual is or should be in your organization. But Turnkey Solutions can implement all of these controls with you. We might not be able to force your board of directors to meet, but we can do the rest of it. But we've got to start with a really good risk assessment, and that's something that we definitely can help with. We certainly recommend, if you're a current customer and you have not stop to visit with us about your most recent risk assessment, please do so. If you're not a customer and you'd like to talk with us about what a risk assessment looks like or what might be an appropriately sized one for your organization, let us know. Call us today at 844-881-7377. That's toll free, 844-881-7377. Chat with us or visit with us online at www.turnkeysol.com. or find some way to reach out, chat with us here on whatever media you found this webinar from. And that's it. We look forward to helping you. We hope this has been beneficial to you, and we look forward to talking with you next about other things that are relevant to your organization, cybersecurity, business compliance, IT support, or just whatever it is that we can be helpful with. We look forward to the next webinar and to our next opportunity to serve you. So without anything else, we'll go and have a great day. We wish you all the best, and reach out with your questions. And thank you so much for your attention. Have a great day.